cover messaging, we'll cover some faxing, which I didn't put on the outline because I don't like faxing, but people use it, so we'll have to learn how to. We'll go through how to use SIP endpoints and registering to SignalWire without having to need a SIP server, SIP domain apps, and then we'll do some advanced LAML and end with a simple IVR project that will showcase how simple it is to build an IVR on SignalWire. First of all, some useful links for the presentation, and I'll also briefly get you the link for the actual presentation, because it's here. Okay. I'll put it in the chat, so anybody would like to join, just follow along the slides and prefers to have them on their own screen. It's there. It's generally easier to read code and copy code examples from there if you have the slides ready. Okay. As I said, we have a little example where that is held in this GitHub repo. It's just a simple thing that we'll go through later. The main things we'll need is the LAML XML, the LAML REST API, and the guides that will help us through the workshop. So first of all, getting started. Of course, we will all need a SignalWire registration. So a space is SignalWire URL. You only need an email address. I'll sign up to. I don't have an email to use, so I'll do it anyway. So anyone who doesn't have a SignalWire account, we can get one quickly for you by doing. Well, I'll open an incognito window, going to SignalWire.com. This is something I'll advise everybody that's participating to do, and you can also use the code I'll put in the chat, which is Coder Games, to get $10 of credit. So I'll try and sign up for SignalWire. It's very easy. All you need is your email address. I'll sign up with, let's see if I can work this using.
Main region. Items. SignalWire main region. SignalWire invite button. 090. Loading video screen list of 6 items. Unlabeled.
That's noisy. What's going on there? Okay, so I sent myself an email, and I'll go check it on my other account just to make sure. Again, just enter your email and get your verification code. This is going to be a bit of a process, but I'd really like everybody to have an account if possible. Otherwise, it's too hard to follow along. I'll click on this from email. Great. So I'll move the window over here just so I can finish the registration over here. My space is going to be Luca cluecon. And we'll see in a bit what a space is. A space is, in brief, your URL in the SignalWire world. So my space will be Luca cluecon at .signalwire.com. I'll repeat my name, SignalWire.
Okay, all right, thank you so much. Okay, bye.
And I'll just create a random, password. So, whatever. I'll change his password, so don't worry about that. Okay, so Luca cluecon. There we go. So I now signed up, and if you'd like to add the credit card now, feel free to do so. I'll skip this for the sake of getting the presentation going, and I'll skip the step. And I'm all set. I'll just confirm that I'm ready to, I agree to the terms and go to the space. Sign in using my Luca. I sign up, and here we go. This is my dashboard. So we'll do a tour in a bit, but for now, you can see that I am in trial mode. And you can see I'll keep this as I have this account in trial mode, and I have one that is not in trial mode, so we can demonstrate differences, but I'll go over to those. So now that we've signed up, let's go back to the presentation and start learning. Okay, after signing up, we'll see what's on the dashboard. So A space is your URL. So I signed up for a space that's named Luca Cluecon. Projects are used to logically differentiate environments. So you'll want a project for development, you want a project for production, you want a project for staging, you want a project for tests. That's pretty much what it is for. Phone numbers are just what it is. They're the IDs you can purchase endpoint and voice messages and fax services. LAML is the language we use, the XML dialect we use to define call interactions. SIP is Session Initiation Call Protocol. Relay is our newfangled call control protocol, which we'll touch on just in passing, because I thought that this being a basic cloud workshop, I'd rather use the LAML interactions, because they're simpler. And integrations are what we touched on towards the end of the presentation. Okay, so right now, this is something that you might wanna or not wanna do. I don't actually have a number to verify right now because all US numbers I own are verified, but you might wanna do that. Although you can do a lot of things to a trial account if you just verify numbers. So how to verify number, you go to phone numbers and click on verify a phone number. Enter your phone number, enter an extension if you have it, usually don't. You will receive a call. The call will give you a verification code, and through the verification code, you can just confirm you're the owner of the number. This is important for two reasons. When you're in trial, which you can get out of by adding a credit card and adding some funds to your account, you're only able to interact with a phone number that is verified. And in general, you will need to verify phone numbers to use them as caller ID on calls if they're not on your account. But we'll see how it works in a bit. Okay, then we'll go get a phone number. In this case, I will actually buy one live just so we can, so I create a new project. I will call it cluecon. And there we go. Remember, there's SIP, relay, etc. I'll go to buying a phone number. I'll get a phone number. As you said, I didn't really verify one. It works pretty well. I'll search for a number containing, or rather ending with the word Luca. So we support searching for sort of vanity numbers. So this is thinking. Okay, as you see, all the numbers I searched for end with 5822, which if you look at the digit keyboard of a phone, well, used to be like that. Now you have to bring up your smartphone and bring out your dial app. But still, that will be, so this number will be 626-988 Luca, which is cool if I want to be a dentist or something like that and I want to get called. So I'll buy the first one. I don't really care for it. It comes from, until, as you can see, you can specify area codes and search for regions, which are effectively states, and cities in case you want a number from a specific area. Not all area codes are available at all times, but generally speaking, when they free up, we get them as quick as possible. You'll also notice we can also purchase a toll-free number, which we can do right from here, or we can apply for a short code. Those are more used for messaging, so toll-free as a space and being used for voice calls too. And short code is something we'll go through briefly, which is the main way of ensuring your messages, your text messages get delivered. So, okay, now we have a number set up. In the chat, but nothing there. Did I buy it? No. Okay, I'll buy this phone number. There we go. So for right now, we'll leave the number sitting here. But let's do a quick tour of the dashboard. As you can see, numbers can accept calls with voice calls and faxes, and then handle calls through a variety of endpoints. We'll go through a few of these later, and the others will just explain. But we'll use a couple of these right now. So, okay. Secondary, what we'll do is actually, now that I've shown you how to get a number, I will switch to my actual known trial account because it's easier, and I call this clue. Again, as you see, I'm separating projects logically by name and space, so they so I effectively find everything from one project in one spot. These are not really sub accounts though. That will be a slightly different process. So I'll get another phone number quickly, and then we'll go back to it. Let's buy first one. got a random number from Ohio. Cool. As you can see, provisioning numbers is instantaneous and extremely powerful. And you can get the number right away. Of course, we have a full API, which is outside of scope, but we have a full API that allows you to purchase numbers and set them up directly from your application. So you can, for example, purchase a number for each one of your customers and attach it to their account without having to go to the SignalWire dashboard. Okay, so now we have a number. Now it's time for some theory. Voice call. So the first step is how to do a voice call on SignalWire. Of course, we purchase a number. Now we'd like to call it and see what happens, right? The SignalWire way of controlling calls goes through one or two ways. LAML is the main one that we're using for the tutorial. Relay will be the other. LAML is an XML format SignalWire uses to control calls. Instructions are executed in the order they are defined in the XML, and documents can be linked together. It's worth saying that, generally speaking, your application should be generating the responses because, of course, it's responses will be usually based on what your application needs to do, such as who's calling you, what time it is, what input they entered, etc. While you can also use LAML bins, which is a way of hosting static LAML bins, and to SignalWire directly, and that will allow you to do simple flows, such as I don't know, call forwarding, or allows you to do reading back input, etc. It's very simple to work with. Okay, so as you noticed in the previous slide, if you look at the dial tag that we're using, so first of all, this is normal XML. Response wraps the whole document, and dial is a one of the verbs. Dial is instructing the platform to dial this number from the caller ID that came in from the call. This is interesting because, as you can see, even if it is XML, we do support some limited logic in the LAML that allows you to make it a little bit more dynamic. Sure, what's going on here? Okay, there we go. So that's the LAML. That's LAML templating. That's LAML templating. Sorry about that. Quick, I was looking at just some people we can't hear. We'll see if engineering can help them or support. Okay, so going back to LAML templating, variables that are present in the request can be substituted by using the Mustache syntax, which is just a it is just a simple double. It's just a simple double brace. So, for example, the LAML you're seeing on the screen will read the number back to the caller. So the caller went here. Your number is +144, blah blah blah. There's in general in the documentation you'll see that we list all parameters that are included in a request, and you can use all of them in a LAML templating request. We use that just in a bit. Okay, so enough for theory. Let's try and go set up a call that will say just hello world, but it's a good start. Great. So I'll go to my dashboard, which is here. So just I'll put this one down for now. Don't really need it. And this one here. Okay, so I'll go to my dashboard here, which is the one that where I just created the number. Remember, I'll go into the LAML tab. I'll zoom it a little so it's easier to follow. Okay, and I'll hit bins and create a LAML bin. This one, simple to create. I will create a bin called Hello World. Follow along if you like. It's pretty easy. We'll have SignalWire say hello world. This is a great honored tradition of programming, right? To have an hello world to help. So that's what you need. I'll save it, and I'll get a URL. I'll give you just a few seconds more to complete. In the meantime, I'll copy the URL for the bin and then go back to my phone numbers where I have my single phone number. Click on the phone number, edit the settings for the phone number, and so I want to handle incoming calls as LAML webhooks. There's a few other options, such as LAML application, which is a named bin essentially, the Outflow, SIP Endpoint, Verto, WebRTC, FreeSwitch connector, Agora connector. We'll see some of these. We'll talk about the others, but for now, we want a LAML webhook. LAML webhooks are the most simple way of handling a call. Going down the page, just to take a look, we'll see we are also able to specify a primary webhook failure URL. So this uses a fallback if the first one fails. Bins never failed, but you might want to have one. Status change webhook is interesting. It's where SignalWire will send updates on the life cycle of your call. So every time you get a call, you get a request to that webhook with ringing, answered, and hung up, and all the states in between. Messaging we'll set up briefly on another, but it's going to be handled much the same way. So now I'll go check that I have the correct LAML bin here, and I'll save. Right now, well, you can just call the number and you'll hear "Hello World." It's or call, of course, call your number. It's even better if you've been following along. Yay, it works. Not much in the way of audio here, but of course I mean, it is just a start. One important thing I want to touch on: if you go to usage, you'll see every call and every number and every action you have performed logged with explanation of what went on, including that the webhook was fetched, this was around, and then the call was answered and completed. Of course, if the call failed, it will say failed, and all of these information is available through the REST API. So you can do that. You can list calls on your own platform, or you can differentiate them by customers, so you can build each one of them differently. It is a good way to handle things regarding billing when you're doing third-party billing. Okay, so this was the first call. Oh, okay, Chrome has decided to think on me for a while. Okay, back. We're back. Okay, we'll go back to presenting. So this was easy so far. Anybody who has questions or requests, we can put them in the chat and we can get back to them later. Okay, so that was an inbound call. We'll leave it there for now and know that we can do much more complicated things with LAML, which we'll touch on in just a minute. But the second thing we want to try is to trigger actions on SignalWire. You will need a REST call. First of all, we'll go get our credentials, and in general, examples in the presentation will be in Ruby because I had to pick one language, but I also kept the CURL examples when possible, and we support languages via our SDKs, precisely JavaScript, Ruby, Python, C#, Golang, and there's more coming. Okay, the next step will be to get our credentials. Just to show you where they are, will be useful in general. Your credentials are in simple API. I'll create a token. Give it the name, the usual cluecon, which right now is how I'm naming everything. And I'll leave it permissions as they are. Of course, as you can see, we can specify the token to only have some permissions. Say, in case you only want to make voice calls, you don't need the messaging and task. You can just turn that off, so you don't risk anybody sending messages on your behalf without knowing. There we go. Now we have a token we can use later for the examples. Okay, Keep in mind that the token is really only needed for outbound calling, not really for inbound calling. But still, the following step would be to set up Ruby. So again, I don't know how many of you have Ruby running. I don't know how many of you have want to follow along. Well, but this part is going to be a little bit more technical, but it's still useful. I mean, we can you can install SignalWire and just instantiate using it using the various using the usual instructions. But also, you know what? I'll link this. There is a client libraries and SDK link here, which I actually didn't put in the presentation, but I'll stick it in the chat and also add it to the presentation. Oops. I'll add it to the presentation later. Or put it here. There you go. So anybody who's following around to the presentation now has the link in the presentation directly. In case you want to do things using a different language than Ruby, but for now we'll keep going with Ruby. So as we can see, we simply instantiate the SDK, create the REST client with the project token, with the project and the token and a SignalWire space URL. And then you can use the client to make all the calls you need. Just to be clear, and you need a project ID and a token. Project ID is here, project ID. Every time you see project or project ID referenced, it's this one under API credentials. This is the same ID for every project you create. You create multiple projects, you get different project IDs. Otherwise, every token is the same. And then you need the token, which is created case by case. So maybe you want a token for every one of your servers, maybe using the same token for production that's different than staging. You can mix and match, but one project can have multiple tokens, and it will always be using one project ID and one token from the project. And this is going to be our first call. So this is pretty easy, but I'll try to explain. I'll try to explain anyways. In Ruby, which will be the same thing we do in any other language, we'll include the SDK, instantiate a client with your project token and the space URL, and create a call. The main fields here, as you can see, are the URL to and from. URL is where the call will go after the call is dialed. If you remember, when we dialed into our phone number, we had set up the phone number to handle the call using a specific LAML bin, which was in our space. You could do the same thing, or this could be the URL for your application. 2 is the number that actually rings. That number just gets called and has to be verified if you are in trial. Otherwise, you can dial to any US number or international numbers if international is enabled on your account. And then from. What's interesting here is probably the from field. From field is the caller ID. Caller IDs are a bit special, and we'll touch that in just a second. The URL version is very much the same, only you can do that for many other languages that doesn't have an SDK. We're simply posting to the endpoint, adding the URL to and from field. I think there's a URL equals missing there, but we'll fix it later. Okay, so what will happen in this case is that when I when I run this code in Ruby, I will get a call on that 1+1 number specified in 2. And then when I pick up the call will be handled by the URL specified here. So if I do this with my phone number and a URL that is the label bin we used earlier that says hello world, I will receive a call. And when I pick up, I will hear hello world. Not very useful, but it's very useful if you add features on it. Okay, so one special feature you might want to know is the status callback. When specifying an REST API request, you can specify a URL where you will receive updates on the call. You can subscribe to various events, initiated, ringing, answered, and completed. We let that segmented because otherwise you get if you're doing a large number of calls, you get a huge number of events. Well, this way you can just subscribe to the events that matter to you. Generally speaking, most people care about completed, so we are defaulting to completed. Completed means the call has ended. So every time a call that you initiated to the REST API ends, you will get the call disposition and hang up reason. This is important because it's a snag for some people, especially in trial, but in general when starting out. What's important to know is which caller IDs are accepted when using the REST API. Of course, you can use any number you own on your SignalWire account. You can also use any number you verified using the phone process we did earlier. This is whether you're in trial or not. And only in an inbound call to LAML via DAD, the caller ID from the inbound call. That is, when I am handling a call through LAML in inbound mode, so I set up a bin to receive the call from the DID in the dashboard, I'm allowed to use that caller ID to dial out using dial. We'll see in a bit what dial entails, but in general, that's the idea. So, for example, you are allowed to forward a caller ID from someone that is calling your application. This is important because it effectively enables call forwarding without having to verify numbers of the people that call you. So you're not able to use arbitrary caller IDs. You can't just use your friend's number to do a prank call. But if you're building an application for your own usage or for a customer that needs to do call forwarding, you can do that. So if I call into SignalWire, SignalWire is allowed to use my number as the caller ID in that application for one call, or rather for the duration of the application. When doing an outbound SIP call, which we'll touch on, any caller ID, but you must specify one. So this is important to know because it hits sometimes that since it's any caller ID, some people are led to think it actually will be something you cannot specify. Well, you do need to add the any caller ID, which has to be, in this case, when you're calling out to SIP, you can use any caller ID. We delegate checking the caller ID to the downstream provider. That is, if you're whatever you're calling via SIP wants to honor your from header, it will have the from header. Otherwise, it will, I don't know, blank it out or something. It really depends on the actual behavior that you're encountering. Okay, so let's go through a few interesting things with LAML. Of course, I wanted to do some practical stuff in the workshop after some theory, so we won't go through all of them in detail. There's very good documentation about them, but we'll see a couple examples and we'll also go through all of them quickly. So dial is the verb that allows you to dial a phone number. So when a call is dropped into your LAML document, you will be able to dial a number, a conference, or a queue. Number is self-explanatory and it's also used by to dial a SIP.
E aí, como está o cenário de...
No habla español.
Tá show de bola.
Dial is a so dial is used to I unfortunately don't speak Spanish. Sorry. The number is used to dial into a phone number, but also a SIP number. Oh, sorry. I have many Brazilian friends. Sorry about that. The number is a again, number of SIP endpoint. Conference is interesting. Conference allows you to drop users into an audio conference easily. It's got many controls to allow people to be moderators, mute and unmute participants, dial out to them so they can be added, etc. And queue is a classic phone queue that you will use to dial. Actually, queue is used to dial an agent into a queue. If you have people that have been added to a queue via the enqueue verb, which is right below it, you can then unqueue them and have them talk to someone using queue. Enqueue puts them in a queue that can be specified with hold music and all stuff. So, and all queues are first in, first out, unless you change some of your settings or pull people out of the queue manually. Gather allows you to get input, both speech and the TMF. We'll use that extensively in the IVR. Hang up is just that, just hangs up the call. The difference with reject, which you see a few verbs down, is that reject is used to hang up the call immediately, while hang up will actually enter the call flow, then hang up. So if you want to actually say your application wants to not even pick up the phone, you will have to use reject, not hang up. So pause allows you to wait for a specified amount of time, and just that, it's very useful if you're doing automatic interactions with IVRs, which some people do. Play plays audio, allows you to specify a loop timer, so you can repeat the audio file 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, or forever. Redirect allows you to change the context, so we'll use that later. Redirect allows you to move the call to a different LAML document. Everything after redirect, that's ignored. Say allows you to speak to the user, and it's a text-to-speech, high-quality text-to-speech. I really like it. We support a lot of languages, and we also support SSML, so you can vary the speed, the pitch, and have it interpret dates, numbers, and all other special kind of terminology as you better feel. So that's going to be what you use a lot of the times as the main feature. Stream allows you to send the audio from the call into a WebRTC endpoint to WebSocket. It's used for advanced call analysis and tools like we have customers that use Stream to interpret the audio from a call in real time and provide insight. Okay, so let's go into some anatomy here, which is an unfortunate need before we go more into detail. Gather. Gather has a few parameters. Action is where Gather will send its result after it's done. So if you were asking yourself how a complex webhook interaction happens, and we'll see that in the IVR later, you will have this document you're looking at as the first document in your application, for example. And we'd ask them to enter the I think the message and the parameters are at odds here, but bear with me. Let's look at the parameters, which are more important. So when the user actually presses 1 digit, there's a num digits 1 at the end of the tag, and they're inputting a either speech or DTMF. They can also say 1 with a timeout of 5, which means the application will wait for a maximum of 5 seconds, no matter whether they enter something or not. Well, if they enter it, it will go immediately to that example com URL. If they don't enter anything, it will say we did not receive any input, and then say goodbye, and then it will end. Your callback will receive a confidence and a speech result parameter or a digits parameter containing the input. So what you do is this will be the first action in your flow. Then you'd have another action receiving the input, and that looks at the digits parameter and says, oh, okay, this guy pressed 1. I need to do this thing. We'll do that in just a minute. Webhook requests contain your call SID, your account SID, to, from. Called is interesting because the from, since we can set the caller ID to be different than the actual number the call is coming from, the call is going to call this the actual number that was dialed by the person, as opposed as the current destination. That's what your caller actually input under PingPad. Might come handy in some situations. Call status skewed. API version is used to 2010 because we're during some standards, and the direction is inbound. This was taken from an inbound call. Great. So let's switch things around. Well, let's go to messaging first because they're all useful. It's short anyway. So receiving SMS is done pretty much the same way as you will do on voice. So you'd go to your dashboard, which Chrome has decided to think about on me. You go to the dashboard and just set your handler to use a LAML bin or an endpoint. Keep in mind you can have different handlers for SMS and for voice. So all of our numbers are set up to be both SMS and voice capable. So you can do. I want to transfer my number. I have to click on the wrong number. Yeah, you can move numbers between projects in case you add one by mistake to one project and one move it around. But you do a LAML webhook here that will in fact, let's do exactly that. So I'll go here, copy my own code, which is quicker. open a LAML bin. So I'll go to LAML bins new, and I'll do SMS forwarding. There we go. Before we go forward, let's just take a look at what we're doing here. What we're doing here is we are forwarding any and all SMS that are sent to the number we point to this bin to this made-up number. We will probably add an existing number. That's coming from the incoming call. This works. We're doing this in the past. This again because the caller ID can be the same, and we'll say repeating the number and also using the body. So what happens here is that when someone texts the ID I have set up, the message will be forwarded to the other number I handle here, and there will be the number it came from and the body of the message. Effectively, you can use this to not give out direct cell phone number for texting. You can set up your number on SignalWire and then give out the SignalWire DID to people, and when they text that number, you will receive all numbers from you will receive all texts from that number. So I just go here and set up a LAML webhook again, and say that when a messenger coming in, I just want it to be handled through that. So right now this won't work because the number is not correct, but it's simple enough, and you can try. So in general, messaging is simpler, and also in general, you don't always want to send out a message, right? Most likely, you'll want to just do this. Go into the message tag and just use the so the message tag just responds with a message to the user. If you don't specify it to, the message will be sent to your to the number that's messaging you. So for example, the super simple example here, which we'll find if I this hello from SignalWire. If you put this into your dashboard as the handler for a number, everybody who texts the number will just get back hello from SignalWire. Can be useful as an autoresponder. Generally speaking, you might be want to just doing an empty response, which is perfectly valid in case you're handling the message at the level of your own application. So you are not forced to send a message back to someone that messages your number. You can just do something else. What's important to set up is the your webhook actually handles like even if you don't, you do need to return an empty response. We'll see that happen in the actual IVR later. It's all the same whether it's LAML or LAML is voice or message. Receiving SMS is also pretty easy. Sending text messages is the same thing as calls. So just send it to it will just use messages. So this is important. Delivering SMS requires abiding to a code of conduct, and there's a link at the bottom will help you navigate this. This is important in case you're looking at using SignalWire for bulk messaging, and it's not only SignalWire has strict spam filtering rules, but also carriers in general have some. The few rules: avoiding links, especially public URL shorteners. Your own domain for your application is usually okay, but depends on the content, really. We've seen people in the past where suddenly carriers will just start rejecting messages. Always have an opt-out clause. That's a nice gesture towards your users, but it's also really useful in getting your messages through. Send personalized messages that don't look like they are just, hey, you won the lottery. Click here to get all your money taken away. Maybe don't do that because people generally don't take well to that. And the most important thing is to use toll-free numbers, or even better, short codes. I didn't mention short codes because short codes are more geared toward a professional use. But if you're interested in using a short code, which is a 5-number digit 5-digit number that you can get that has pre-approved content and much higher rates of sending, please contact me and I'll put you in touch with sales. For now, if you're interested in doing any bulk messages, I would suggest using toll-free numbers because they have much better deliverability. That is, you have many more chances of getting them through. And at the bottom, I added an example of a message that's considered good practice. So as you see, I'm saying, hello, Luca, personalized, no links. This is Dr. Brown office, your appointment, blah, blah. Send stop to unsubscribe is important because allows you users to remove themselves from the application if it's so desired. Okay, before we go through something more practical, let's take a quick look at faxing. Faxing, which yes, faxing still exists. The demise of faxing is unfortunately greatly being exaggerated. There's a lot of people using faxing, and jokes aside, it's a very realistic and real presence in the market. So we support faxing in a variety of ways. Receiving a fax on SignalWire is simple. Pick the accept incoming calls as fax option and set up a webhook. Sometimes you can get it wrong here if you don't pay attention. So make sure you do accept incoming calls as faxes. So it's possible using Relay, which is a more advanced topic, which maybe we touch on briefly, to do both on the same number. This is accept voice and fax if you're doing some detection. In LAML, you have to decide beforehand if your calls will be handled as fax or as voice. Then you will set up a webhook and using the receive webhook, the receive action with usually an action parameter. The default is PDF, usually used in an application. Note that if you put an empty receive in your bin and have a static bin, faxes will just appear in your dashboard. It can be useful for some people who have, very simple use cases. You can, if you send yourself a fax, it will appear in usage alongside with the other stuff. So maybe, and I mean maybe you might. There's a lot of people calling me. That's why that confused me. Okay, cool, great. The okay, yeah. So there's a before we go forward, I think I will actually answer a question that's in the chat. So, do we have a way to make outbound calls to numbers outside the United States or Canada by showing a number from the destination country? So, the destination country is you can dial international from SignalWire, and the ability to verify international phone numbers is coming very briefly. It's not only in the roadmap, it's almost ready to go. So we'll be able to do that soon. So you will be able to verify phone numbers internationally too. Alternatively, you can always dial out through a alternatively you can always dial out through the to SIP. So yeah, you can just specify SIP URI to dial out, as you can see here. I'll just grab it for you briefly. Dial SIP. You can dial out to SIP if you have a trunk setup that will allow you to dial outside. I actually have many customers doing this. This is called bring your own carrier, BYOC, and that's generally what the what users do when they need international service. I saw another question about the purchasing of international phone numbers. That's coming too, but it's going to take a little while more. And Germany especially is problematic because of how hard it is to get a message. A phone number there because of the address verification, but we'll get there eventually. For now, we advise using a provider that you already set up through SIP. And again, that will be bring your own carrier, BYOC, which is something a lot of our customers actually do. So going back to faxing, if you set it up without an action, you will just see the PDF in your dashboard. Some people are just doing that. Some people are just literally just setting up a faxing machine to receive and just get them in the dashboard and just look at them. If you'd like your application to handle them, know that the action URL will receive a webhook that will contain the media URL. So where the URL of the file is on our S3 cloud. what's the fax status if it's completed, and the number of pages, and a few other things that are equally interesting. SIP. Okay, so briefly, so we got a little time for the IVR list. SIP is the industry standard for telephony. We support the ability to do outbound dialing to SIP via LAML, as we just saw. We support the ability to do inbound calls to domain apps and registering endpoints without the SIP server. You can register your phones directly to SignalWire or your servers directly to SignalWire without having to need the proxy. So to register an endpoint pretty quickly, you can go to SignalWire endpoints, create one, and register using the SIP demo and making a call to a verified number in case you're in trial. I added a link here that points at a SignalWire SIP.js demo I built that's been built for a while, and you can use that to test even in future. Like if you need that, just it's actually not strictly limited to SignalWire, but you can use it for any SIP registration. That also makes us think about the fact that we do support SIP over WebRTC in the browser, and in fact, I recommend doing that for a few scenarios. So that demo also helps you to export SIP easily without having domain apps. So this is more important. If you go to the SIP domain apps and create a new domain app, you're able to specify a LAML webhook to handle the call phone number. So effectively, when you create a domain app, such as the one I have here, which is my name, Alfredo Rivera, inbound.signalwire.com, anytime you dial anything at your DApp URL, you will get a request to your webhook that contains a SIP user variable that corresponds to this anything part. So you can do forwarding or whatever. The most important thing, though, is that you can set up a domain application to handle calls exactly the same way as in the as a phone number. So a little bit of advanced LAML. We'll start late, so we can maybe hold on 10 minutes more if it's not a problem with the manager. So updating a call. This is very, very important and interesting. So if you're running a call that is happening right now, it's talking to someone else, you can use a REST update request to change the URL on the call, effectively making it so that the call is now executing a different URL. So remember, a URL means a LAML generating URL, whether it's a LAML bin or it is SID. So call SID, as you notice, is posted in every single status callback that you get during the life cycle. So you just get a hold of it and then update the call using HTTP REST request. In that way, you can just have the call go to this new different URL. It's useful for a variety of reasons. Say you want to put someone in pause. One of the things you can do is park them in a LAML document that has a play verb with a loop component set to 0. So effectively, they get music forever, music or whatever samples you added. And so please wait. Your call is important to us. Blah blah. All the various lies we say when we build IVRs, right? And at some point, you decide you want to pick the person up and put them into a conference. The best way is just to update their call and drop them into the conference using the dial verb. And finally, we get to see something in action. So the simple IVR is a function that I built that if you are in office hours, it will ask the caller to choose between sales or support. Outside of office hours, it will ask the user to record a message. If you dial sales, it will call one number. Support will call multiple numbers at the same time. So we support dialing up to 10 destinations at the same time in the same dial invocation. And the first destination that picks up makes the others hang up. So if you want to dial them in order, one by one, you need separate dial invocations. If you want to dial them all at once, you will need to you put them all together, and the first one to pick up is the one who quotes wins and gets to talk to whatever the destination is. Okay, good. Let's dive in. First of all, the application sits here, and it might be some. That's a very, very simple application. It's a single file app. I added a few links in here, but let's dive into the code. It's probably better to read here if I make it a bit bigger, much bigger. Okay. Yeah, if something is not visible on the screen, please let me know through the chat. I do take a peek from time to time, but it looks like it's showing pretty well from what I see on the stream. So what we do here is, well, we set up a couple easy things. This is actually a time clock. So that's where you go when you call sales. We'll handle the first action to the start pin. What you can see here, okay. So I was trying to remember. Which one I had set up here. This is phone numbers. Sorry, I'll switch spaces. So as you see, I use my projects to keep things separated from each other. So what I have set up here is my usual testing setup. So what I have here is a phone number that is pointed at, you see this URL, lucasmbp.ngrok.io. ngrok is a tunneling application that allows you to go to point an outside domain, including HTTPS, to any to your local computer, including port numbers. So as you can see on the right hand side, I'm actually pointing. I don't know if this will work pretty well. So I'm pointing this domain to my local host 567, which is not 4567 port here. This is usually what I recommend doing when you're testing. I think someone is actually calling me. Or not? No, that's different. That's a different window. Okay. So actually, if you call this number right now, it will ring on my computer. Well, not ring. You see the call go through here. There you go. Someone's calling. Let's see what they're doing. See, when I got a payload, I'll make it as big as possible because otherwise it's unreadable. So if you look at the bottom side, you see that we received a call from someone who dialed in, and the more than one actually. This is the call SID I was referring to earlier. Account SID, this is my own account. From, well, someone's calling in from 44. I don't remember that prefix. Is that France? And you're calling my number. And of course, the first call is queued because it hasn't been picked up yet. So the first thing I do is pick up. Effectively, when you don't need to actually answer a call in LAML, you can just handle the you can just do whatever. Run the LAML. Okay, so what we're doing here. So this is just login, puts parameters inspect. We're creating a response. Creating a response, say, message, thank you for calling SignalWire, unless params retry. This is a trick that we'll see later. In fact, you know what we'll do? I'll make a quick change later. And then we'll save the hour. This is mostly a thing of mine. I use it here. So if the hour is bigger than 9 and smaller than 17, the office is open. So what we'll do is we'll use a getter with a menu, timeout 5, num digits 1, and the getter will say message, press 1 for sales or 2 for support. And of course, if the office is closed, we'll just play. Our offices are currently closed. Please leave a message after a beep. And then we'll do a recording. As you see, we'll do a recording of a maximum length of 15 seconds with a beep true and a timeout of 2. That way, you can, of course, the beep is just the usual recording beep. You can, you can imagine what that does. Okay, as you see, this is the important part. When we specify the getter, we'll use a menu, action menu. Just starting with a slash makes the request go back to the URL it originally came from. Okay, so that's the trick. So anytime someone presses the digit, the call will go to this other endpoint called menu. If pressed 1, it will dial sales by just dialing a number. If they press 2, it will call support by doing 2 dials. You remember there's 2 numbers here. So there will be 2 numbers in the same dial invocation, which means effectively that you end up with 2 calls going to different phones. The first support, we're calling support here. So we're trying to get a hold of people we're trying to get a hold of people because something's broken. So we'll call all of them at the same time. First of all, to pick up, and the others will hang up. So you can make sure you're hitting someone in support. Okay, so I added this as a bonus. This is not part of the flow. If you press 3, it will ask you to leave a message after a beep. Why put this in? Because otherwise you will not be able to test the recording without it being either before 9 in the morning or 5 in the afternoon. So, but it really does the same thing as below. This is something that I really wanted to show you. When the user presses something else or hasn't pressed anything, we'll do a response, say, message, sorry, I did not understand, and then do a redirect to start retry 1. So effectively what we'll do is, if the user has pressed 4, we'll go into the menu action. The menu action will not match, and we'll say, we don't understand, and redirect to retry with start, but with the retry parameter set to 1. That way, we will skip saying, thank you for calling SignalWire. So the flow that you experience is, thank you for calling SignalWire, press 1 for this, press 2 for that. You press 4, and then you will hear, sorry, I did not understand. And then you go back to start. This is using a query parameter. This is a great way of propagating data between your actions. So you keep doing the right thing. Not that we're using the action record. The record action is called when the recording ends. The only important thing here is that we will print the recording is in params recording URL and is recording duration seconds long. It's really not much there. Of course, as I'm saying here, we should actually do something with it. I'm putting this in to demonstrate. You can see where the recording URL comes from and where the recording duration, how long it was. But then we're just returning a hang up. So we're telling call, okay, we're done. What I wanted to do before, I wanted to do for you because it makes it far more enjoyable to run is this. I just make a 5-second change, relaunch the application, and run a call with you. Okay, so I'll stop the server and well, mostly look at the console here. This is the more important, more interesting part, really. As soon as the app actually starts. Okay, so we have an app here, and I'll call the number. I press 4. As you can see, I'm getting. Now I'll press 1 for sales, and then it's dialing there. Well, I'll hang up now. The important thing is that let's see what happened here. So when I dialed in, I received these parameters telling me that the call was being set up. Then we generated. This was the first response that was generated. Say thank you for calling SignalWire. Gather action menu, num digits 1 times 5. Say press 1 for sales or 2 for support. This is exactly what you hear if you want to try calling the number. Then we'll. I press 4 on purpose. So the response is, sorry, I did not understand. As you see, we're redirecting to start, but with retry set to 1. As you can see, when we go down to retry set to 1, the thank you for calling SignalWire clause is not there. This allows us to reuse the original menu. Of course, in a complete application, we'll do things like count how many failures, and after 3 or more failures, I don't know, dial support anyways, or say, hey, hello, sorry, I can't really understand you, goodbye, and hang up or whatever, right? And then we'll do a dial. This was calling it. This is actually a weather service. So you just hear the time and probably the weather in DC or something like that. I'll do one more run for, sorry, wrong guy. Okay, I'll do one more run for you. Now I'll press 3. As you can see, we're seeing the SignalWire LAML in the console, and we're seeing the requests go back and forth. And in a bit, it will go on timeout, or if I stop speaking, it will time out in 2 seconds, as shown by this parameter here. Okay, so recording ended, and there we go. After recording ends, I got the recording in this URI. Recording is, you see if it's, well, we have a cloud storage service that allows you to download the recording at your leisure. Well, that 13 is missing 13 seconds, but the recording is in that file and is 13 seconds long. There's also an API. Of course, we have almost all of what you saw is available through REST API. So there's an API that allows you to retrieve recordings after the fact, or list them, or whatever. The more important thing is that here, as you can see, after recording, I'm just returning hang up. So when you're done recording, okay, I'm done. This will be the same mechanism we'd use for voicemail. So we've gone through the application, and we've gone through the corresponding LAML responses for every action. Actually, what I think I'll do is after this ends, I will add these LAML responses to me for the application, and all take a look and just see what the flow looks like. Good. So we're very over time. So I'll just go through a few lightning quick. I promised lightning quick. So handling input, we saw it in the console. So mod SignalWire allows you to connect a SignalWire SIP trunk to your FreeSwitch installation. The setup is pretty easy and allows you to buy phone numbers and point them at SignalWire at your FreeSwitch servers and make and receive phone calls. The easiest way is being on FreeSwitch 1.8.3 plus. You can load the module or add it to your module's configuration. Get a token from the CLI of SignalWire token and just go to the dashboard. In the integrations, as soon as you've set up with the connection token, you'll see FreeSwitch sync up with SignalWire, and you will just be able to receive calls without any other change. We have other integrations available, of course, which are Agora, a video conferencing application where we provide inbound phone capabilities. You can dial into your Agora rooms. Google Dialflow. SignalWire is a one-click integration partner and provides call transfer features. So you can transfer out of your bot to a different phone number when the interaction is done, enabling call center flows, etc. Zapier, as you know, is one of those applications that allows you to glue together different APIs and services, and really helps you get flows built. For example, I use it for receiving faxes on a number I use only for that when I actually need to receive a fax from time to time. It's easy to build texting to email and faxing to email flows. And take a look. We've got lots of documentation on that. There's a lot to take a look to. Well, it was a bit of a whirlwind tour, but an hour is the right amount of time for getting some things done, but of course there's much more to look at. So please take note of my email address. All of the slides and documentation are online. I will be adding those LAML interactions to the code repository, so you're all able to follow up and see what's happening there. And feel free to reach out to me, and anything I can do for you, I will be happy to help or put you in touch with sales or the people who can help you. If there's any questions, we can maybe have them in the chat. Otherwise, I think we're ready to wrap up. Great. So I think we're done for now, and let me know again. Take my email with you, and anything you need, just drop me a line. Thank you again for attending the workshop, and I'll see you around cluecon.
Thank you, Luca. Awesome job.
Thank you.